This episode of Dopey is brought to you by our very good friends at Oro Recovery. Not Aloe, but Oro. Located in sunny Southern California. Created by our friend Bob Forrest and his friends Evan, Jared, and Bob to create a treatment center that helps alcoholics and addicts by using compassion and connection rather than control. They have decades of experience, many decades of experience in treating co-occurring mental health disorders, including severe mental illness. They make sure that your kick, your detox is as comfortable as possible, which is great. They have amenities you wouldn't believe. The surfing, the sound bath meditation, the equine therapy, the potentially spiritually transformative sweat lodge, and so much more. But you don't go to treatment for the amenities. You go because Oro is going to treat you like a person. I have friends that have been there. They've all said they're treated amazing. If you're fucked and you're willing to go to sunny Southern California, I highly suggest going to Oro. This episode of Dopey is brought to you by our friends at SoberLink. At SoberLink, somebody cares about your recovery. Unfortunately, relapse is so common, especially when it comes to alcohol, because it is widely available and highly prevalent in many social settings. That's why having true accountability and a deterrent from drinking is so important for staying sober. SoberLink has been empowering and helping people with alcohol use disorder since 2011 and is trusted by hundreds of treatment facilities. The SoberLink system consists of a portable handheld device that documents proof of sobriety in real time, keeping you connected to your family, friends, sponsor, treatment professional, recovery coach, or anyone else who worries about your well-being. As an exclusive offer to our listeners, email info@soberlink.com and mention Dopey for $50 off your device. You do it for that someone who cares to help you to stay off of the sauce. Check them out at soberlink.com/Dopey. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by our old friends at Brainwashed Coffee. And their coffee is delicious. And they're from Port Chester, New York. And that's where I went to college. So I love Brainwashed Coffee. They also give 50% of all of their profits to people and movements around recovery, which is amazing. But they have a new mug. It's a beautiful pink and black mug made by Mir. Perfect for hot and cold coffee. The lining will not affect the flavor of your favorite Brainwashed brew. It's leak-free, insulated, BPA-free, and again, it's pink with the black logo. The Dopey 20 code is still active for 20% off coffee orders, and we added a special code for your listeners. Recovery Mug, valid all recovery month for $5 off the mug. Codes can be combined for huge savings. That's brainwashedcoffeeco.com. I want to tell you guys about a great recovery podcast called Recovery in the Middle Ages, a podcast about two middle-aged suburban dads and their pursuit of life, love, and recovery. Listen as they discuss current topics of interest to the recovery community, including 12-step, alt recovery, the newest medical research, and talk about their daily struggle to maintain their recovery and anonymity in the world of soccer moms and PTA meetings, if the neighbors only knew. Find Recovery in the Middle Ages on all podcast outlets and at middleagesrecovery.com. That's right, it is middleagesrecovery.com. Check it out. I was on one. It was great. Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. My name is Dave, and I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. How are you doing? I know you didn't ask, but I'm doing well. Thank you. It is Friday. And the show's coming out today. It's Friday, October 1st, and I don't know if you guys know what that means. I know what that means. It means tonight in America, they are airing the Sopranos prequel movie, The Many Saints of Newark. And Dopey Twitter has been abuzz with excitement and speculation and all sorts of stuff. And some listeners abroad have seen it because they released it early in England, and they say it's amazing. And, you know, I'm hearing a lot of chatter about this movie, and I'm excited to watch it. I am. But I'm not crazy for it. And I'll tell you guys why. I'm sure you're wondering, Dave, you love The Sopranos. You're a Sopranos freak. Why aren't you going crazy? And I'll tell you. It's because I'm scared, and I don't want to be disappointed. So when I'm scared and I don't want to be disappointed, I like to minimize my expectations so that I am not disappointed. Tonight, I will get ice cream, and I will sit with Linda. Linda will probably bail. And then we'll get into a fight, and I'm going to scream at her that I'm watching it anyway. I have to watch it tonight, and maybe she'll watch it with me. I don't know. We're going to watch it tonight, so stand by for next week where we will tell you. I'm sure you're dying to know what I think. I'm sure I'll tweet about it tonight. So go on Dopey Twitter and see what I thought of The Many Saints of Newark if you care. And I hope you guys like it. And I just realized something also. We're like running out of Dopey emails and Dopey voicemails. We need the Dopey. You know, I mean, I've run out of drug stories. I'm fucking sober 6 years. Hit us with the Dopey. We need it. Write an email to dopeypodcast@gmail.com. Send in a voicemail to the same place. Keep it around 5 minutes. Make it dopey as hell. Make it funny. Make it good. For the sake of the show, give us your greatest Dopey hits. There's so many of you guys out there. I am so confident that we can get a renaissance of Dopey stories. So please do that for us. That would be great. If not for me, do it for Chris, because he lived for hitting him with the Dopey. Also, the Dopey Patreon is the thing that's keeping this ship afloat. So if you're not supporting Dopey Patreon, it would be great if you did. If you are supporting it, thank you. We put out a crazy video with my dad this week. I released the Dopey $10 bonus episode with Big Steve Parrish, who is the Jerry Garcia Band tour manager. Very interesting stuff. This morning, just because I was feeling generous and crazy, I put out the Tiffany Jenkins interview, the video. I didn't realize I had a video. So I put that on Patreon. There's a ton of shit on Patreon. Please support us and go to www.patreon.com/dopeypodcast. And of course, we have tons of gear. We're just about done with the Dopey Bertha dead thing. That's going to be done Sunday, the t-shirt. We're going to sell the hoodies for a few more weeks, I think. And we have a new Dopey Frankenstein Halloween shit, which is also limited edition. Support the show, buy merch, go to Patreon. That's my whole spiel. I appreciate you guys helping out. So I'm sure you guys have heard about this horrible story about this young woman, Gabby Petito, who died, who they found her body out west, and she was some kind of social media influencer. Her thing was van life, and she was traveling the country with her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie, and now Brian is wanted by the FBI. He's like the main suspect in this case. I don't know if you guys know this, but Gabby was from right where we live right now. She's from like the next town over, I think in Bayport. And Linda has been following this story really closely, and the people where we live are incredibly invested in this story. We did a vigil for her. Everybody lit candles. It was very moving and sad, and she was young. And it's just a horrible story. And a lot of the media is saying that the evidence said that she was abused by her boyfriend in a domestic violence situation and possibly killed by him. And this episode very much delves into domestic violence and death. So I just wanted to make it clear that if you are in any kind of bad situation, that there are people that can help you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE, which is SAFE, or 7233. Just tell people what's going on, because I have 2 daughters and I would hate for them to be in any kind of situation like this. We have a ton of young women listeners and a ton of women listeners, and if anybody's having a hard time, reach out to that hotline. Their website is thehotline.org, thehotline.org. If you need help, check them out online or call them again at 1-800-799-7233, which is SAFE. 1-800-799-SAFE. So being in a situation in domestic violence is probably one of the worst situations you could ever be in. Please ask for help. Extract yourself from that situation because it is so toxic and dangerous. And I bring all this up because we recorded the interview with our next guest a few weeks ago before they found Gabby's body and before this whole story came out. But I thought it was very, very important to talk about that stuff with you guys before we play the next interview. His name is Sam McBride, and he got into a horrible situation of domestic violence, and he paid the price for it, and he lives with the remorse and the horrors of it, and now he lives in redemption and is a hopeful guy, and I was very happy to have him at my dad's house a few weeks ago, and here he is. His name is Sam McBride. People call him Sammytown. He's from the Northern California punk rock band called Fang. Here he is, Sammytown. So I'm at my father's house with a guest, and my guest is Sam McBride, a.k.a. Sammytown of the punk rock group Fang, notable for lots of stuff. Some stuff is scarier than other stuff, but crazy drug stuff as well. We'll get to everything. Welcome to my father's house. Welcome to Dopey.
Thanks for actually letting me into your father's house. I mean, that's unusual. People don't let me into their houses a lot of times, so I really feel honored. You know?
Well, yeah, I feel safe with you.
Yeah, it's good. We don't have our clothes on, so that makes it even better.
Makes it very intimate.
Said, leave your clothes at the door. I didn't know that was part of Dopey, but apparently it's a thing.
I never told anybody because I've been doing a lot of episodes of Dopey, and the Dopey Nation feels very comfortable with my dad. But I never mentioned that my dad's actually an Orthodox nudist as well, and he's always naked. They always assume he's clothed.
It's always just in the house. Drop your laundry at the door.
We had Lenny Dykstra from the New York Mets here, right? And Lenny is a scary fuck, and he's not sober. Yeah. And my dad was like, "Let me hang out before Lenny gets here," because my dad's a baseball fan, but he was kind of a little bit nervous because I also had to pay Lenny. I didn't talk about this on the show.
Okay.
And he also said a lot of crazy shit before he came up, but I had to pay him. And my dad was like, "Let me hang out."
Did you was it like cash in an envelope, like he was waiting at the door kind of a thing,
It was similar. It was sort of like that. And he was a mess. He was fucking in bad shape. Oh. He comes up, he meets my dad, and after my dad left, Lenny Dykstra was like, "Wow, your dad is so good looking. I would love to pimp him out to my old lady."
Wow. Yeah. He was like going full on swinger action. He's like,
he wished it had been a nudist apartment when he got here. He looked visibly, and my dad's 77 years old. So that's enough of nudist Dopey. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And you are finished. You just finished a American tour with Fang.
We did a 2-week East Coast tour. It's hard to tour right now. I think we, in some ways, jumped the gun. It was a little early when we booked it because we started in Florida. Delta is running rampant, and it definitely affected the shows to a degree. But especially the last 4 shows, we did Philly. Which was great. We did, we played the Bowery Electric last night. And
how was it?
That was awesome.
A lot of New York City punk show up?
Yeah, and the thing that they're working on is matinees that are all ages. And so I'm definitely all about playing for, youngsters. It's like I don't really care about playing for a bunch of grumpy old fucks like myself, because it's definitely all about the kids. Like I was arguing with Johnny Stiff. If you know who Johnny Stiff, if you were in a punk rock scene or the metal scene in New York, then you know who Johnny Stiff is, and he's bitching about the kids. I'm like, dude, all I know is I'm 56 years old. I don't know anything. If I want to know something, I have to ask the kids. Because when I was 15, 16, I knew some shit.
Right.
But now I don't know anything. And everybody, it's like they're bitching about the kids. I'm like, dude, when we were kids, we hated people like us.
But when you were kids, there were no people like you.
Well, we were talking about this before. There were the hippies.
But when you were kids, there were the hippies. But
they were the older people. That's why we were talking about punk rockers and the hippies, because we were trying to get away from that. We thought we knew it, but we did. We knew more. As a kid, what's really happening. What's really right and wrong. At least I think that we were far closer to it then the kids are way more united than we are as adults. You know, they know more. So I try and listen to the kids.
Let me ask you this. When you were a kid and when you got into the punk rock scene, you were basically a drug addict straight away in the punk rock scene, right?
Yeah, I just jumped right in. That's one thing that, like, I mean, I started getting high through the Boy Scouts. You know, I mean, I started smoking weed, but really I was in a Boy Scout troop in Oakland, Troop 7, and our scoutmaster was a pot dealer. And we were a rough Boy Scout troop. Huey Newton's nephew was in our Boy Scout troop.
Wow.
I mean, we were like the shit, you know, and our scoutmaster was a pot dealer, and we were slinging bags for our scoutmaster to fund our camping
You'd
trips.
get like the weed slinging badge.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I got my dope dealing merit badge from the Boy Scouts of America, you know.
What I want to know, though, is when you got into the punk rock scene in Northern Cali, there were drugs everywhere. When you're touring now and you play an all ages show, do you see drugs around? Do you see that around the kids, on the kids, in their faces? I
mean, you know, you see them getting drinking, but I don't know if there's the you know, speed was huge in the Bay Area punk rock scene. That was like the drug of choice at that time. There was speed everywhere. I don't. It's hard to tell. You know, I see more of the kids drinking than, but you know, who knows?
Right.
You know, it's like I don't sit there and hang out with them to know what, you know, what's really going on as far as, like, you know, their taste in drugs, or if they're getting high or if they're not getting high.
I remember your first speed story was Insanity. Like, what was the story again?
So I was maybe 14. I was 13 or 14. Me and this chick, we went to San Francisco. So we used to spare change, you know, and that was like a great hustle. And so we went out and we spare changed in San Francisco. We made a bunch of money, and she was older, you know. And like I said, I was maybe 13, maybe I turned 14, but we made like $30. We came back to the East Bay, and I'm like, okay, what are we doing? You know, because she was probably like 16. She's like, oh, we're going to get some speed, you know. So we went to this notorious place, Barrington Hall. They had punk rock shows there, and it was a dorm for Cal, but it was like it was a drug dorm. Like, there was every drug you could want. It's just like, oh, that's down, you know, 5 doors, you know, whatever you wanted. And so we went to this one guy's dorm room, and she knocked on the door. There's a bunch of people shooting speed in there, you know. And so I'm, you know, we gave him, you know, $20, $10 each, you know, and he lined it up. And this is like 79, you know, AIDS hadn't come out yet. Nobody knew about Hep C. Rigs were hard to get. So literally he had like one rig, you know, and there's like 10 people in a row, and he's just going and shooting everybody up, same rig, over and over again, you know. And I just watched what everybody else did, you know. But I will say, in his defense, when he got to me, he kind of looked at me, he goes, have you ever done this before?
Because you must have looked very youthful.
I mean, I don't know. I in retrospect, who knows? I mean, I didn't look like, you know, like I was not shaving yet, you know. And I just watched what everybody else did. I'm like, oh, yeah, totally. And I just stuck out my arm like everybody else had done, you know, and wrapped a bandana around it, you know, and made it look like I knew what I was doing, you know, and I was off to the races.
Do you remember being a Boy Scout and your scout leader, like, being like, help me sell weed? And when you started to smoke it, was there ever a question in your head, like, this isn't what I should be doing? Or like, was there a conscience? Because like when you're fucking getting a shot of speed in your arm, like that's pretty heavy duty, drastic. Like obviously you had drank a bunch, you had smoked a lot of bud, like so you were like, I'm bad, and I'm with this 16-year-old girl, and I'm on my way, right? Like was there ever a section in your youth where you were like, holy shit, this might be too much?
No.
Okay.
I mean, really, as soon as I started getting high and selling drugs, I was all in. I'm like, this, you know, like ride this shit out till I die. Like I never thought I would make it to be 18 years old. When I was a freshman in high school, I'd gotten in trouble and I dipped out for like 3 weeks. And this huge, all throughout my high school, there was a rumor that I had died, you know, and you know, of questionable circumstances. Nobody questioned the rumor. Everybody already just assumed.
Because you were insanity personified.
Yes, because, you know, I mean, I was, I mean, I had fucking purple hair. I had my ear pierced. I was constantly getting jumped and in fights, you know, and I was dealing drugs. The cops kept coming to the high school. So it wasn't even as a freshman in high school, nobody questioned the rumor that I had died. Everyone's just like, well, of course.
Yeah, Sammy's dead.
Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, we were waiting on that. No big deal,
So after you had taken the first shot, were you like, I need to keep shooting speed? Like how did it develop?
I mean, it definitely was like, because I was already all in on getting loaded every day, at that time.
With weed and alcohol.
And then as soon as I shot speed, I'm like, okay, now I've got something else to add to my repertoire. And so, that was the end goal of every day, to get loaded, speed if I could, booze and weed, no matter what, and really I shot speed for a couple years until I had yet another older girlfriend who she was into shooting coke, and she had the money. So she was at first for a while buying me speed, but finally she's like, I'm not buying you speed anymore. You're just going to have to shoot coke with me. And I'm like, okay, fine, if I have to,
And how much older was she than you?
So she was probably 4 years older than me, because when the first time I came to New York on my own, she was going to NYU, and I was 14 or maybe 15, and she was 18 or 19.
You always had older women, right?
Yeah. It's weird, because now you look back and it's like, like these women, some of them would like go to jail. When I was 15, my parents had finally thrown me out of the house. I was on felony probation. I was, a regular day drug addict. I was doing coke and speed, dealing, and they did not know how to deal with me. So my mom finally was like, you need to get the fuck out of here. And so I left. She threw me out, and I moved in with this girl. I was living on the streets for a short period of time, and I moved in with this woman, and she was 30, and I was 15. Like I go to my probation, my probation officer, because I got to check in every week, and he was like, how's it going? I'm like, well, I'm not on the streets anymore. I met a girl, and he's like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, yeah, she's 30 years old. She buys me a pack of smokes every morning. And he's like, man, I'm so glad you're not on the streets anymore.
Right.
And that was it. That was like, that was totally acceptable.
Do you think like what is that about? Like when you're 15 years old and you have a 30-year-old girlfriend, like part of me is like, right on, good for you. Like that's fucking, like if I was 15 and there was a 30-year-old woman who wanted to take care of me, I would be psyched. But if it was my kid and she was 15 and there was some 30-year-old man, I'd be like, fucking no way. You know what I mean?
No. I mean, I
how does that work in your mind?
It obviously for both of us, there was probably a lot of trauma. It was not a healthy relationship. Certainly neither of my kids, when they were 15, if they started dating a 30-year-old, there would have been a big issue.
Big problem.
Big problem. And so I think times have changed. Ideals have changed, things have changed, and I think
things are looked at differently.
And also for the better.
Definitely.
That I think we realize it's like, okay, that's not okay, for an adult to be in that kind of a position with a 15-year-old kid, because when I look at when my kids were 15, they were like kids, so I think back, it's like, like shooting drugs, because she was, we were shooting coke together, shooting dope, and doing all kinds of fucked up shit. And it's like, that's not a place for a 15-year-old kid to be.
Did you stay in touch with her?
She's still alive. And so I haven't seen her now, since I left the Bay Area, but every once in a while, she'll show up at a Fang show, and
nice.
She's still going. She was definitely into speed. So you got to figure she's now like a 70-year-old speed freak that's never really
gotten sober.
No. And somehow is still alive. Somehow.
Right. In speed years, that's like 150,
or
right?
like 3,000.
Right.
She's got no teeth. I mean,
right.
But she's sort of maintained. She's still alive, which is mind blowing in and of itself.
I don't know why that's funny to me. It just is. Now, when did music come in?
So, I mean, it all gelled together, early on, 13, 14. I got turned on to the Sex Pistols, so it was like, at first it was, like drugs, and then it was like drugs and punk rock. And so, I mean, I got turned on to the Sex Pistols in the UK. My dad teaches he's retired, but taught at UC Berkeley. And so he took sabbatical. So we moved to the UK in 78, I think. And I got turned on to the Sex Pistols there. And so when I came back, it was on. I started my first band. We had this like garage punk rock band, Reign of Terror, and it was like me and we were a bunch of snotty kids, and then,
were you all punked out as soon as you did it?
Oh yeah. Like I purple hair, got my ear pierced. And back then it's hard to imagine now, but if you were in 1979, if you were a kid with an ear pierced, like if you had your ear pierced in 1979, you were going to get fucked with. It was, like that you were asking to be
marked
a target. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so purple hair, earring, freshman in high school, it was on, as far as that I got fucked with constantly, got jumped, got into fights, got called every name in the book, but that was the punk rock scene in the Bay Area was just off the hook, great bands, lots of shows. And it was also super inclusive. Like you could be a young kid, and I mean, which is good and bad, but I'm like 14 years old and I'm hanging out with, some other young kids too, but also with a lot of adults, and like with Fang, when I was 15, my best friend was this guy, Joel Fox, and he was a drummer. He played in a couple other bands, and, we'd shoot speed and do crime and, get fucked up and listen to punk rock. And Fang needed a new drummer because Fang started, it was a two-piece like noise band out of Connecticut at first, and then the guitar player moved to California and started it back up. And so he needed a drummer, and so Joel... he hit up Joel and asked Joel to start drumming for him. So Joel went to try out, and I went with him because I was his sidekick, And so when they tried Joel out, they said, yeah, they wanted him to play in the band. And I went up to the guitar player, and I'm like, hey, you guys need a lead singer. And
did you know that you were going to be good? Like when you said that, you were like, I'm going to do this.
I had sang in this band called Shut Up for like a couple shows. So, I was cocky, I was 15, cocky as fuck,
Dealing drugs, using drugs.
Using drugs, and was very cocky. And I'm like, dude, you need a lead singer. He's like, do you know anybody? I'm like, yeah, me, So he's like, we'll come back next practice with Joel and we'll give it a try. And then, so I came back and started singing, and that was history. And, so around that time too, from my 30-year-old girlfriend,
yes,
I'd started dealing Quaaludes, and they'd stopped making Quaaludes. And so Denise, who was my older girlfriend, she had this older guy that she knew, and he cleaned out his storage, and he found this jar of 1,000 lemon 714s.
I feel like I got to do them. Like, I don't know how it happened. I have this weird memory that I got to do them for a little bit.
Well, you're 47. There was like we used to get them from Mexico, because after they stopped making them in America, there was some that were still made in Mexico, and I think even there was like home press Quaaludes that were.
I think I think I really liked them. I don't really remember as well as I'd like, but I think I really enjoyed Quaaludes in my early 20s.
Loved Quaaludes. I mean, anybody who's seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High remembers that scene. Don't drive on Quaaludes, because that's real. Because you don't want to fucking drive on Quaaludes. I mean, it was like you would take one Quaalude and it would be like all the really good effects of being super drunk without like throwing up,
without nausea.
Yeah, without nausea, and it was quick. Like 20 minutes later, you're fucking, singing every song that like all. It's like it was just like Quaaludes were a blast. That's why they had to get rid of them.
My memory is like it's like this weird sort of Venn diagram between benzos and opiates that you feel that, but you're not passing out.
Yeah, no, that's not bad, and I think it's a little more goofy. You know, like it's got the, you know, it's not quite the.
So they didn't have a real medicinal purpose. Like the way benzos deal with anxiety and opiates deal with pain. You know, what did Quaaludes deal with? Like seriousness, overwhelming seriousness.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. What did they make Quaaludes originally for?
I have no idea. That's why they don't make them anymore.
Yeah, right, because there was no reason other than for the fucking party, you know, but they...
and what were the damaging effects of Quaaludes?
Do not fucking drive.
But it's like, here's a question. It's a stupid question. It's like, if people, and it's not a personal question, it's more of a vague question. Yeah. It's like people imbibe on alcohol legally in order to feel good, right? Now there's recreational marijuana in order to feel good. Right. Like, why wouldn't Quaaludes or nitrous be something that's recreational? I mean, not for you or me, but I mean in general.
I don't know, like...
Pleasure factory kind of thing.
Nitrous, I think, you know, maybe there's an argument there. Quaaludes were... Is
it addictive?
Well, probably. I don't know. I mean, I would assume. But also, it's like you take one... and you're fucking hammered.
Right.
You know, it's not like, you know, there's like, you know, no, you know, it's like anybody who really likes to just get fucked up, you know, then you take a Quaalude, because it's not like you, I mean, I guess you could take half, I don't know who does that shit, but, you know, you could take half a Quaalude and be not as hammered, but, you know, you take a Quaalude and you're like stumbling and like trying to fight that guy because he, you know, looks certain. I mean, it was just... Quaaludes are like being really drunk really fast.
Impairment. Very quick impairment.
Yeah, quick impairment. But a lot of fun, you know. Like if you like getting fucked up, I mean, and that's why they got rid of them. I don't know what they made them.
Do you think there's like troves of them buried in some vault? Like rich people have like vaults of them, or like do you think there are places
only in the dark recesses of my mind?
Exactly. In my imagination, there's vaults
of Quaaludes, like somewhere like with the
with like an old gold mine or something, and there's records and there's Quaaludes
and alien spacecrafts and.
Owsley acid and all that kind of stuff. Don't you think there's not there? You don't think that exists anywhere? Just in my imagination?
I don't know. So maybe somewhere between our imagination and Area 51.
Exactly.
We'll have to go searching. You know.
And you dealt the Quaaludes?
So I dealt the Quaaludes.
Sorry for that.
No. We got tangent out there, but. I started dealing Quaaludes and nobody could get them, you know, and so I mean it was great for me because then, you know, it's like, so who's this 15-year-old kid with real Quaaludes, you know, and so I people started taking notice of me, older people that were in the you know, like more serious drug trafficking circles, because they were like buying Quaaludes from this 15-year-old kid, you know, and they were real Quaaludes, and so. Through that, I made connections with some guys in the Northern California acid family, and then I later, you know, not soon after. I mean, things moved fast back then, but they brought me in. I mean, it was set up that way, you know. Like I'm sure things in New York, you're like somebody's boy. You know, it's like, oh, that's my boy.
I vouch for them.
Yeah, and he's gonna work. You know, he works for me. You know, and you work your way up the ladder, so to speak. You know, so I was brought in at 15. I was given a gun. You know, I was told, okay, you need to go sit at this door, make sure nobody tries to come in and rob stuff, because we've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in here, and you know, so I was brought in as this guy Terry's boy into the Northern California acid family.
We talked about before we started recording this sort of like, I don't know, adversarial relationship between punks and hippies in general, yes. Right? Now, the acid family had to have been total fucking hippies.
It was all, yeah. I mean,
but hippies love punks, right?
I mean, that's the thing. They did. They appreciated me. They did. I mean, to a degree. I think some of them were like, "Oh my god, that kid's fucking nuts," you know.
But they liked that because you're a character then.
Yeah, and also I was a good worker. You know, like, because back then, you know, we were, especially like we're sitting here in New York, you know, I started running acid to New York when I was 16 years old.
In what capacity?
Well, we were doing gels for a long time. You know, that was like the big thing, you know, window pane or gels, you know, and so we would.
You were making them.
Yeah. We had a chemist that makes the crystal, you know, and a gram of crystal makes 10,000 hits of acid. You know, so we'd get the grams of crystal through the family, and then we'd make, you know.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so you take a gram of crystal, and I was like giving up all the old secrets, but really like window pane, Knox gelatin and food coloring. It's not that fucking.
What does that? Explain it to me. I'm stupid.
So, well, if you ever look at window paint, it's like I don't know if you ever eaten window paint or gel acid.
I don't know. What does it look like?
It looks like a little tiny plastic square, but it melts in your mouth.
No, I never took it.
Okay,
I only took
like paper blotter.
Yeah, that's all I ever got.
Window paint was huge, but how you make it, you have to have all the measurements down.
So it like melts in your mouth.
Yeah, it's literally Knox
I missed
gelatin,
out. I really missed out on everything.
And food, because so there'd be like green and pink and orange and blue, But we would take, you take the light fixture, in a light fixture, the old neon light fixtures. If you take the plastic shield that shields the light, if you look at it, it's thousands of tiny little squares that are like a pyramid. And so we'd buy those and we'd cut out and count out 1,000 squares, and you'd make a mold, and then we had all the measurements down, so it's like, okay, the grams, 10,000 hits. We'd usually put up 10,000 at a time, sometimes 20 or 30, but usually 10 to 30,000 at a time we'd make. You heat up the Knox gelatin on the stove, food coloring. We're going to do orange this week, and add in the crystal, stir it up, and then we'd have it marked out, so you pour it in these molds, made from light fixtures from neon lights, and then put it in a dehydrator, and then wait till it was like rubbery and you could peel it out, and then you have window paint acid. And so the other thing, this is before 9/11, nobody searched you when you got on a plane, so they'd send me on the plane. Okay, here, take 100,000 hits to New York, and meet up with this guy and give him, to this.
So how soon after you get hired by the acid family are you making acid, and how soon after are you running trips with 10,000 doses in your back?
Quick. I mean, it all moved fairly quickly. Like Fang started, acid started. This all started right when I was 15 and 16, and it was fast.
When's the first time you took acid in the first place?
I have no fucking idea.
Right.
I can't. I probably when I was 14. It was everywhere. I mean, we're talking about Berkeley and Oakland in the 70s. Acid was everywhere.
Super cheap, super available.
Yeah, I mean, the crowds that I ran in, there was there was a crossover in the punk rock and the older hippies, from the drug scene, and there was an after hours club in Berkeley that was run by a bunch of hippies, and
I think the hippies loved the punks because the punks were super free. The punks did whatever the fuck they wanted, so the hippies really liked that, and the punks hated the hippies because they thought they were lame. Right. So it was like a one-way relationship.
To a degree, I think you're right. I think that's true. I think a lot of the punks were rebelling against the hippies. That some of them their parents were hippies,
right?
And so there was definitely, I think that's.
I'm very interested in the relationship between hippies and punks. I'm really interested. I think that's an interesting relationship in general. When you're making and transporting thousands of hits, like I think the most hits I ever did at once was 6. Like, what's the most? And I lost my mind on 6. What's the biggest dose you ever took? You think?
I have no idea. I know that one time we went out to the desert for the weekend, and I started with 100 hits of acid, and I know I gave some away, but I think I had 18 when we were done, and I think I gave maybe 20 away. So I ate because I was drinking alcohol de caña. It's like a Mexican like moonshine that's super potent.
Right,
so
right.
I was drinking, and I kept eating more acid so I wouldn't pass out. But also, even so, when I got trained how to like put up acid, to blotter or whatever, they would all wear masks and suits, and you would always get fucking high. It didn't matter. I mean, that shit is crystal, like a gram of crystal's 10,000 hits. It's so fucking potent that just being around it, you're gonna get high. So no matter what, every time you did it, you have to commit to. It's like, okay, I'm gonna try and get through this and get this done, and then I'm just gonna be high for another,
day.
Yeah, day or 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever.
Because it's not like bagging up heroin, where like the dust might make you feel good. This shit is it's gonna take you out in this weird way.
So after doing it a number of times, I'm like, dude, I don't know why you guys even bother, because you just, why don't you just go with, so I stopped I didn't wear gloves. I didn't mask up because I knew I was just going to get high anyway. It's like, let's just get it done and then be high. So as far as like how much acid at one time,
it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter because probably when you worked, you were higher anyway because you're dealing with so much of the molecule.
I was on acid on it fairly regularly for an extended period of time.
And when you travel with 10,000 doses, you would just move them to somebody and take the money and fly home.
Yeah, I'd run it. They say, okay, meet this guy here, and also too, like on the East Coast, we had regular people, so I, come out and you get to know him. He's like, okay, meet up with this guy, or stay with this person, and that was just the way it was. And then what happened though, New York, we had a guy out here and gel acid or window pane. He was a junkie, this guy, and he pissed off the family, fucking around, and so he flooded the East Coast with bogus gels, bogus window pane acid. Just flooded the East Coast with hundreds of thousands of hits. Made a bunch of money. Pissed everybody off. People wanted to kill him. Like he was being looked for, like hunted, and had to go way underground. But it killed the gel market.
Because everyone figured it was bunk.
Yeah, because after he had flooded the market, and it was all bunk, then no one would buy it. So we had to switch over. We went back to blotter.
That's interesting. So maybe that's why I never got to see it. Because of this junkie friend of yours.
Yeah. Tommy, who I don't know, he's probably dead by now, but Tommy flooded the whole East Coast with bogus gels, and then they couldn't sell them, so we switched over to blotter and microdot.
Don't you think it's also interesting, like, I've been hearing a lot about acid families, this acid family concept since I started making Dopey. The first time I even heard of it was like in 2011 in treatment. There was some dude who sold acid, who was my roommate, who told me about a Northern California acid family, and I'd never heard the phrase. But I'm surprised there's no movie about the acid family.
I mean, I think probably not. That I know that they were pretty smart.
Because they kept it undercover.
And they kept it undercover. They had a smart business plan in that there was a couple guys that were on the top of the pyramid. They only sold to 6 people. No more. They had 6 customers. Those 6 people were only allowed to also only sell to 6 people.
Super savvy system.
Yeah. And so once you got past that, down after that second tier of 6, then you could sell to as many people as you wanted. But those 2 top tiers, so there was like 6 people, and then there was 36. There was 36 people, there was 6 people, and there was 2 people. And for at those tiers you weren't allowed to like if they found out you had veered off the program, there were repercussions. They didn't fuck around. They were hippies, but they were also
serious.
They were gangsters.
Right.
It was millions of dollars, and they had, like I said, they gave me a gun when I was a 15-year-old kid. They weren't fucking around.
No, they weren't.
And they were like, if anybody comes, you shoot them.
Right. And they never got toppled either, right?
No, one of the cells finally did get cracked, and they went down. But when that happened, basically, I think at that time, everybody kind of closed shop. People made a lot of money, and a lot of people retired, and I think that was, I know a lot of people retired.
So the acid family is done.
That was years ago.
And so you're 15. A lieutenant will say.
Well, not when I was 15. I worked my way up. It took a couple years.
Okay, so how old are you once you're really doing shit?
So what happened is I was working for the family, but also Fang started taking off, and we started touring. And so I had a program, because we were in a different city every night, or back then you tour, be a couple days in a town. I would go to a town, let's like roll into, say, Indianapolis, Indiana, and say we're going to be there, especially if we were there for like 2 or 3 days. I'd say, okay, who sells weed in town? I'd ask the promoter, whoever were, the punk rockers, where can I buy some weed? And they'd say, well, it's this guy. I'm like, well, can you take me and introduce me? And so I would go and have him introduce me to the local weed dealer, and I'd say, hey, look, I'm an acid dealer. I can get you really good acid, really cheap. If you're interested, when I get back to California, I'll send you some. If you like it, then let's do business. So usually after we come back from tour, I'd have, 10 to 20 addresses. and I would just on the strengths send out 100 hits, to all these people, and say, the first one's free.
The first 100 are free.
First 100 are free.
Amazing.
Here's 100 hits acid. If you want to do business, call me. And it was all Western Union and mail order.
Was that your plan or their plan?
That was my plan. I just started doing that on my own.
You were like, fuck it, I'm touring anyway. I might as well find some contacts, make my money like this.
Absolutely.
And they'd Western Union the money, and then you'd send them sheets.
One day mailer, you Western Union me the money, and I will have your acid in the mail tomorrow.
Acid was the only drug that I sold successfully.
It was a lot.
It's easy to make money with acid.
Well, it's like they say, don't get high on your own supply. It's hard to eat your profit in acid. It makes it a lot safer
without just going bananas.
As far as business goes, it's far. Like if I tried to sell heroin, that never would have fucking worked.
No, I could barely. I didn't sell much heroin, but whenever I got a lot and I was meant to sell it, I might break even. You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah, if you were lucky.
Yeah, if you were lucky, exactly. But it's a mess. With acid, it wasn't like that. With that, and with acid, I would pay. I don't remember how much we'd pay, but we'd make enough money that it was a good business in college.
Oh no, yeah, right. And so I would get grams, through the family. I would get grams. At that time, it was $2,500 for a gram, so it was 25 cents a hit to me.
Right.
And so, this is also a long fucking time ago. This is like the 80s. So I don't know. We're talking like 40 years ago now or whatever. But so I would sell,
So a sheet's like $25.
So, well, I would double it. So I'd sell sheets for $50.
No, but I'm saying if you sent one out, you're basically giving somebody $25.
Oh, yeah, giving somebody $25. It was totally worth it. But even the cost, I was selling acid at 50 cents a hit, wholesale. To all over the country, but it was really good acid, and it was that cheap. So you could, like anybody who was a businessman, they would jump on it. Like, this is great acid and it's cheap and it's as regular as I want to do it. So I built up a lot of clientele all over the United States by the time I was 18 years old.
Now, one thing that it's hard for me to comprehend, because you were a serious alcoholic, a serious drug addict, a serious musician, and yet you had this business, like you're developing a clientele and you're all fucking deranged. Like, you managed to keep that shit together.
I did. And the other thing is, like, I managed to go to practice,
And all that time you're shooting coke, you're shooting speed. When does dope show up?
So coke, if anybody has shot a lot of coke, at some point, you kind of want to come down. And
yeah.
So I had this coke dealer, and like he was a big time coke dealer, but he would shoot coke on the sly, and so none of his other friends like shot coke. So I'd go to his house, and we'd spend like 3 days shooting coke till we like barfed our guts out. It was fucking horrible, but. Then he'd break out some heroin so we could come down and actually like pass out. Did
you ever come down with the Quaaludes? Was that like a thing?
That was also a thing. Quaaludes were also good. Not as good as heroin, I will say. That heroin was much more immediate. Like if you're gacked out of your mind on coke.
It's the perfect antidote.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. So I always started making sure I had some, if I was going on a coke run, I made sure I had some heroin, so I could fucking, shoot coke till I ran out of money and then have a shot of dope to fucking knock myself out. But I really liked the heroin. And I quickly just stopped wasting my time getting to the heroin by shooting the coke and just started fucking, shooting heroin,
Because you probably had extra money because you're making all this money.
Yeah, no, it was.
You could have just done the coke and the heroin.
I could have, and there was times when I'd do speedballs. I wasn't, but I really like once I started doing heroin. I was like I loved heroin.
Me too.
It's a thing. What are you gonna do? I really liked it. It was a problem because I was strung out when I was 16. Like I had a habit. Like I had to kick. Like it was like.
Well, that's the fucked up thing about being a drug addict who makes that much money and they're young. You know what I mean? Because you have all the ability to buy drugs like a rich, competent adult, yet you're 16 and you're in a band and you don't have good judgment, and then you get fucking strung out on heroin. So, like, why wouldn't your habit grow?
Yeah, and it's so I was strung out. what had happened as far as like the family had gone, the guy that had brought me in, I ended up getting together with his wife. And so it created this like love triangle. It got super like, I mean, there were at one point I thought that I was going to get shot, you know, but there were no bullets in the gun.
Because you had sex with the boss in the acid
I had sex with
family's
the
wife.
boss's wife, but
In the acid family.
yes, but now he
Was he a hippie?
Yeah, he was a hippie gangster, you know,
Like a long-haired gangster guy?
Long-haired gangster.
Who dosed occasionally?
Yeah, and shot dope and coke,
Right.
and his dad was a gangster in L.A. and he was like, so he had told me it was okay for me to have sex with her, you know.
He was like, I'm cool.
You know, well, yeah, I was guarding the house, and he was in New York because he had a girlfriend out here, and we were doing a lot of business out here. He was in New York, and his wife came up and can kiss me, you know, because she wanted to get laid, you know, and I freaked out, and I called.
This is your livelihood,
Yeah,
and
you know,
he's a gangster.
and this is like this is like my father. I looked up to this guy, you know, and I called him. I'm like, dude, you got to have somebody come out and watch the house. He's like, what's up? I'm like, well, I got to be honest. Kathy kissed me. I kissed her back. Like, if I stay here, you know, I know we're probably gonna fuck, and I'm not gonna do that to you, you know. So, and he's like, dude, just go fuck her. He's like, it's cool. I don't even trip. Go, you know, she needs to get laid. Go fucking bang the shit out of her. It's all good. So I'm like, are you sure? Like, you know, I was like, is this really
Is this what we do
yeah,
here?
Is this how this works?
Is that acid family?
Is this like hippie culture?
Right,
free
exactly.
love? What's really going on here? So he's like, no, it's all good. So then we start banging on the regular. So that wasn't a problem. But when things got problematic was he came back one time from New York because he was spending like half the time in New York. And when he came back, she told him, you know, I was on the couch when he was back. But one time he came back and he's like, no, now you're on the couch and Sammy's in the bed. And that's when
she should never have set you up like that.
That's when he went for the gun, but she was smart enough to have hit the bullets, and yeah, so that was, you know, that created some problems, you know, for me. But over time, what happened, you know, was basically she ended up moving back to Southern California. He ended up kind of getting shipped off to Texas, and by the family because he was super strung out on heroin. I actually had kicked and had kind of pulled my shit together at like 17, 18. So I was chipping, you know, but I wasn't strung out, and I was, you know, dealing, you know, I was making money. And so I was able to roll for quite a few more years, you know, after that, you know, still working, you know, I mean, like I said, I moved to Germany. You know, when I was 19, I moved the band to Germany, and I started dealing overseas.
Selling acid in Germany, making a shitload of money.
Yeah.
And playing music.
Playing music, yeah. I mean,
to all the crazy German punks.
Right. It was, for me, like, I love shooting heroin. I love getting loaded, but I fucking love music. You know, I love punk rock music. I love playing music. So everything I did was always in some way kind of trying to keep things moving, like fund the band, making sure we had access to shit we needed, being able to do things. You know, I mean, that's always been like punk rock saved my life, you know.
Do you think that if you hadn't had the side business and all of the, you know, because like, whatever, you're a drug addict, but you're also a big time drug dealer. Do you think if you hadn't had the distraction of dealing, you would have put more attention into the band?
Maybe. I mean, like, I never like, I'm a singer. I'm not a musician. You know, maybe if I had not been, you know, like hustling since I was.
But you also wrote the songs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a song. You know, I write songs. You know, I'm definitely like I write all the lyrics.
And a lot of famous people have covered your music. Like, I mean, like there's like your reach is far and wide, and like
that nobody knows, but it's all okay. No.
Well, it's
no,
some
it's
people know, you know.
Yeah.
I know some people know.
No, we've touched. There's been a lot of bands that have covered our songs. Metallica covered, you know, a Fang song. Green Day covers a Fang song.
Didn't Nirvana play it?
Nirvana covered a Fang song. Butthole Surfers, Mudhoney. There's like that part of the whole thing is mind blowing. But I mean, there's also some of that. It is and it isn't. I used to sell acid to the Butthole Surfers, you know, like, and so Nirvana, I never had a personal connection with. Metallica, we used to party together, you know, back, you know, they were from the East Bay, so, you know, like the metal and punk scene. So Green Day, they were from the East Bay. They were a couple generations behind me, but we were like, you know,
in the same legacy, lineage.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
You know, it's just those bands like became some of the biggest bands in the fucking world.
But they weren't selling tens of thousands of hits of acid on the side. That's exactly my point.
No, they were probably trying to fucking learn how to play guitar.
Right. Yeah. They were focused. They weren't like, and you know, Nirvana, like obviously he got very sidetracked in shooting dope and coke and everything. But he wasn't selling tens of thousands of hits of acid either. I'm just offering you something that maybe, it doesn't matter now, but like maybe that was a piece of why Fang isn't Metallica, because you were like the kingpin of fucking doses.
Because I was a little busy.
Yeah, maybe.
I was busy over here.
Yeah, exactly. So you come back, you know, and what's up with the acid business? Like how did, because like that's where we get, right? Isn't that where the story turns?
Yeah. So I mean, so we moved there. I was 19, moved the band to Germany in '85, and you know, so I started, you know, setting up things mostly in Germany, but you know, selling acid in Europe. Did some deals in the UK, but after we lived there for a year, we toured. We wrote, you know, we wrote and recorded a record over there. Then we came back because we wanted to continue, you know. I needed to continue making money, you know, and continue touring in the States too. You know, like keep working the band in bigger ways, or you know, and so then we were back and forth. You know, I re-picked up with my connects in the U.S. and then I, you know, was sending acid to Germany on the regular, and then we were going back and forth, you know, for a couple years. But then that was the beginning of the end. You know, also. When I was in Germany, I just drank. I never shot dope for whatever reason. You know, like I can't really explain why that happened, because there was like I shot dope one time.
Maybe you sense the danger, like when you have a habit and you're in another country, you're so vulnerable.
Maybe, you know, I mean, I don't know. The people, things clicked so well when we got to Germany, you know, as far as just musically and business wise, it just. But all the people that we were like super tight with, they were anti-heroin specifically. They drank like fish. They fought. So that was probably a big piece of it. So I think that had a lot to do with it, you know. And I wasn't strung out, you know. I kicked, you know, and I've been chipping, but I got there, and so I just kind of left it alone. But when I came back to the U.S., when I'm back in Oakland, you know, then I'm shooting dope, and so that's. So I was able to maintain that for a while, you know.
Would it be like when you came back to Oakland, were you like, finally I can shoot heroin?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Like I'm like, okay, let's go cop right now.
Right.
You know, like I had this one heroin dealer, she's dead now, but I started copping heroin from her when I was 16. You know, she was much older than me. And I literally, this woman, I copped heroin from her from the time I was 16 until the time I got clean at 41. I mean, off and on.
That's funny. We both got clean at 41.
Yeah, you know, right. But she was always there. Like if I was in the Bay Area.
Well, it's like when you get home, you want to have what you want to eat. Like, oh, I can't wait to get that sandwich.
Comfort food.
Exactly. No, but I'm serious.
Yes.
You probably come home from Germany. You're like, I'm done with the schnitzel and the fucking.
I'm gonna go see Patty. And I'm gonna go shoot some dope.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so for a while it worked because we were touring so much, you know, and. Back then it was, you know, like later on I toured as a junkie, you know, and having to cop and everything. That's fucking gnarly hard work, you know. But usually for me, I would just start to have a habit, and we'd go out on the road for like 3 months. So I'd feel kind of shitty. I'd just drink a lot, and you know, like just kick on the road, you know. But if you're only shooting dope for like 3 months, then your habit's not that bad, you know. And so I was able to kind of maintain that for a while, where I'm just about to get strung out, and we go out on tour for 3 months. You know, just about come home, be home for a few months, and then we're going to Europe for a while. So I was able to do that for a while until the axe fell, and that happened. I was 23, and my girlfriend, who'd been dealing acid for me in Germany, she ended up getting busted. You know, they were having her roommate's boyfriend was selling hash out of the apartment. I mean, they were, slinging dope out of this apartment, and they would have big parties. They were not trying to be low key about it. And so they finally got enough attention that they got raided. And so they found a bunch of acid. They found a bunch of hash. The roommate just immediately rolled. Oh, it's all coming from Sammy from fucking California. Da, 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 da. So I got a phone call and from a friend of mine, and he calls me because we had a tour set up, a record. We're recording. We recorded in Germany with Boy George's sound guy. He had a recording studio in Bremen. Great studio engineer. Had this all set up. 3 days before we're supposed to get on the plane, I get a phone call. Astrid's busted. You can't come to Germany. You're wanted by Interpol. They know that you've been, sending drugs and dealing acid in Europe for some time. So that's when the habits really came home. That's when I got stuck. Then I was stuck in the Bay Area for long enough where I really got a fucking gnarly habit going.
Also, you needed to escape the fear, like these people were after
Waiting
you.
for the knock on the door, because I didn't know if Interpol was going to come to America and find me. I mean, punk rock was underground, but I wasn't hard to find either.
No, they knew who you were, they knew where you lived, and they knew what you did. But why didn't they go after you?
I don't know. I think that maybe I don't know if I think you really had to be a pretty big criminal for Interpol to waste the time and money to actually come and get you.
Right.
And I just wasn't a big enough fish.
Right.
They figure, just like a lot of police, they don't actually go look for people. They know that they're wanted. They know they're going to fucking tick a box.
Someone's going to fuck up eventually.
Right. So they figured, okay. They knew I was supposed to be coming when I didn't show. They're like,
he knows.
He knows he'll show up sometime, and we'll fucking get him.
Right.
So I got super strung out, and things just started to fall apart. Just like with anything, when you're really strung out. You said, how did you keep it together?
Nobody can keep it together. Miles Davis can't keep it together. Nobody can keep it together.
I could not keep it together. So business started suffering, and I'm super strung out, and mainly the band. Everybody knew I was a junkie. I mean, everybody knew I'd been a junkie off and on anyway, but it just became really obvious, as far as like all the clubs and just, and it was, just like any other fucking junkie. Yeah, it does. It's not a good look. It all comes out in the wash.
Because you're also a dick. You get angry. You're unreliable.
Right.
It's all those things.
It's all those things. And so finally the band is like, and they were already pissed, even though, they had reaped the benefits of my drug dealing business for years.
Sure.
They got pissed that, our European tour got canceled, that we couldn't go back. We tried to record the record that we were going to record in Germany in the United States, in San Francisco, and I was a fucking wreck. I couldn't fucking
get it together.
I could barely sing. I was, just fucking gout all the time. And so they finally were like, fuck you. And they walked on me. And so without music, all I had was heroin and drug dealing, and so that's what, that's where everything went horribly, horribly awry. There was a woman that I'd connected in Virginia, like I'd connected with many other of my customers. I met her. She was a pot dealer. She started selling acid for me. She did really well in that area of the country. And when I started falling apart, she was such a good businesswoman. I'm like, hey, and we had a relationship. I'm like, why don't you move to California, like be my full-time old lady,
and we'll work together.
And we'll work together. I'll bring you in. And so she came, and she was not a drug addict. And I was one of those junkies. Oh no, I'm gonna kick. It's gonna be okay. I'll go on methadone. I'll do that. And with no intention whatsoever.
Right, and she believed you.
She believed me, and after a while she realized that she couldn't believe me anymore.
Well, enough is enough at some point.
Right, and so she had hooked up. I had this customer out of Texas. He was my biggest customer. He would come in a couple times a month and buy large quantities of acid, 50,000, 100,000 hits at a time. And sometimes I would be out of town. So when I was out of town, she would take care of business for me. So they formed a relationship, the two of them. And I didn't realize they had formed a very tight relationship, you know, and she was sick of my shit. And so what happened was I was at home. I'd been out of town, but I was back at home, and we were doing a deal. The guy, you know, my best customer he was at the house, and I got a phone call, and it was this guy out of Salt Lake City, and I'd set him up in business. And like when I met him, he was a pot dealer in Salt Lake City, and I'd literally set him up in business. He was about to lose his house. He had like a baby, but you know, he was struggling. And I'm like, look, and I fronted him a bunch of assets. I'm like, why don't you see what you can do with this? You know, and he was able to like turn it around, you know, financially. And so he calls, and I answer the phone, and he's acting squirrely as fuck. I'm like, dude, what's up? Because he was like, well, is she there? And I'm like, yeah, why?
He knew what was going on.
So finally I'm like jamming. I'm like, dude, like I fucking pulled you out of a hole. Like, you need to let me know what the fuck's happening. And so he said, look, he goes, you're right. He goes, look, she's been saying that you're fucking people over, that you're ripping people off, that she's going to move to Texas. We're doing this one last deal, and that she's going to, you know, and that to deal with only her from now on, and that she's going to pick things up after this deal, like in 2 or 3 weeks from Texas.
Did you find that out before you found out that she was fucking the dude?
No, I didn't. So that's the first phone call. Like in my drug-induced state, you know, haze, I didn't.
It's betrayal.
I didn't think any, you know, like I had no idea any of this was going on, because I'm fucking loaded all the time. You know, like if I hadn't, anyway, if this is, I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. And I'm sitting there just reeling, and the phone rings again, and it's this friend of ours in, I can't believe, South Carolina, and he did a little business, but he was mainly a friend. He was a friend of hers, but he'd become a friend of mine. And he gets on the phone, and he's like, hey, just real quick, I got to run, but I want to let you guys know that money came, and I put it in the bank, you know, so I know that I hadn't sent this dude any money, you know, and I've just got this other call finding out there's some shady shit going on. So I just played along. I'm like, cool. How much money is in there now? He goes, so there's like 20K. I was like, now there's like 20K in that account. It's set aside. It's all good. I'm like, okay, thanks. Hung up the phone. So literally within like a 10-minute period, I find out that she's planning on moving to Texas. She's taking my business, and she's been taking money and stashing it.
Confirmed.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so I just leave the house. I don't say anything. I just walk out of the house. They didn't even know I was gone. I just walked, and I went to my heroin dealer, you know, the woman that, and I went and I shot a bunch of dope. I got a bunch of whiskey, and
because you were so upset.
I was fucking crushed. You know, like you said, it was a huge betrayal, and I got super fucked up, and then I went back to, I was going to confront her, and when I walked in the door of the apartment, I think they heard the car pull up. I walked in the door of my apartment, and he's coming out of my bedroom pulling his boxer shorts up. And so then I was, you know, in my mind I was going to kill both of them at that time. Luckily for him, he saw that this was really bad, and he literally like ran, and I chased him around the apartment, and then he ran out the door in his boxer shorts and just took off. And then I went back in, and she didn't make it out of the apartment alive.
Right. And I can't imagine, like, first of all, her name was Dixie.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it feels like. You know, I know what it feels like to be high, and I know what it feels like to get sober. I don't know what it feels like to have obviously killed somebody, but more than that, you've done these interviews over and over and over again since then. Yeah. And every time you do it, I mean, like we actually did this interview before.
We did.
And yes. and I feel you tensing up to tell this story. Like what, I mean, first thing is like, what happens to you when you tell this story now, 33 years later?
30. I mean, it's the last thing I want to do.
Is tell the story. Right.
You know, but also it's, you know, anybody who's in recovery knows that, you know, you have to fucking bare your soul. You know, like if you're ever going to get well, you know, you got to be honest. You got to say what happened. You got to talk about it. you know, that it's, you know, it's nothing that's ever gonna, you know, like I can't change what I did. I can't even up the scales. You know, like if you're into recovery literature, they say you will not regret the past. That's not my fucking story. I regret the past. Like I'm never not going to regret what I did, you know. But I also, like, I have to talk about it, you know, because in the hopes that maybe somebody will hear it and, you know, be in a moment where they can change the course of
somebody else's
life and everybody else around them, you know, and make a different decision.
Well, I've heard you be interviewed also, and you talked about, I think you were referring to O.J. Simpson and somebody saying how he got away with it, and you're like, nobody gets away with it.
You don't get away with it. You know, you know, maybe if you're a true pure sociopath, which they do exist, but there's not very many of them. Then you know, I mean, yeah, I did years in prison. That's, you know, I pay every day for what I did, and I should. You know, it's not like I shouldn't pay for what I did. You know, I mean, I did a fucking horrible thing. You know, I have ghosts that live with me, you know, and they're never going to go away, you know, and that's...
How does that work now?
How does that work now? I mean, if it's, this is, her name was Dixie. If I walk down the aisle in a grocery store and I see Dixie cups, that's a ghost. It's talking to me right there. You know, I mean, anytime that name comes up, you know, certain things I'll see that remind me of her, you know, those are ghosts. They're there, you know, and that's, and that'll be with me till I die.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And, at the time you were incredibly impaired. She had betrayed you on numerous levels, and it's like you were out of your fucking mind. I'm not making an excuse. No, I'm just trying to paint the picture here.
Right. And that's, I mean, then there are no excuses, you know, for what I did, you know, and when you know, you get away from that moment of rage, you know, which, you know, it's a window, you know, if you can get it past that without doing anything, whatever happened, whatever anybody did to you, whatever resentment you're carrying, it doesn't justify the action. You know, it's because the emotion will go away.
Well, that's a huge lesson, and that's something like that everybody can benefit from. And it's just like, it's fucking horrible what had to happen, but to be able to share that lesson is some sort of a good part of it. You know what I mean?
Well, you gotta, I mean, you can't, you know, at least for me, like I said, the scales will never balance, you know, but certainly the fact that I did live, that I did get out of prison, like then there's a certain responsibility for me to do what I can to try and help other people not make the same mistakes that I've made. Or if they have made the mistakes that I've made, have somebody they can talk to about it.
So they can live.
You know, so they can live.
And ultimately, maybe they can be a person in the world that helps the next person and carries a good message and does the next right thing whenever they can.
Right. And you know, I mean, that also, you know, there's the recovery aspect. There's also like the life after prison aspect, because you do a gang of time, it fucks you up. You know, I mean, you were already fucked up to go to prison.
Sure.
But the recidivism rate in America is so bad because you get caught up in the bullshit in prison, and then you know, you're just stuck in that mindset. You can't get out of it. So it's just a revolving door, you know. So it's like, okay, you can do horrible things, and you can get to the other side and try and, like you said, help people and pass it on. You can go to prison, you can get out, you can actually have a life after that.
You can change.
You can change.
But after this happened, you fled.
Oh, I did. Yeah, no, I went on the run immediately. I actually was in New York for a while. I went first to Baltimore, and then I was here in New York hiding out for a while.
So when you're here, are you like, does that pop into your mind, the places you were, like when you're here now and you're walking around, does that period pop into your head at all? Or there's so many different New York periods.
I've spent a lot of time over the years in New York. So and New York is not the same New York.
No, it's memories on top of memories. They take a store down and it almost disappears from your head.
Yeah.
It's like a different place.
It is like a different place. And so it's definitely, so much has changed here, but there are certain memories, you know, from being on the run. I mean, I remember I was copping in Harlem, at that time, because the Lower East Side, this was 89.
Sure.
The Lower East Side, they were just selling bunk bags at this point in the Lower East Side, that used to be the place to cop. And by the late 80s, they started, the gentrification process had just...
They knew they could get over.
Yeah, it just started. So I was going up to 126 and copping up there. And I don't know, don't know if I could find it, but, I almost got killed by like a 10-year-old kid up there, He wanted $1 and he had a gun. So every time I drive through Harlem, I think of that. And that was when I was on the run,
Right.
So that was...
Sure. How did they catch you?
So I ran for a while. I finally was up in Alaska and, because I knew that I had to kick. Like I couldn't keep running if I'm strung out on heroin, it became pretty apparent. It's like, dude, you just can't, I'd had a good, I was staying ahead of the game. But I knew it was just a matter of time if I'm strung out that they were going to catch up with me.
And Interpol has you on their list at the same time.
I'm fucked. I can't, so like I was in New York, I was trying to get to Brazil and that fell apart.
How did you stay well? Like, how did you stay not getting sick on that?
I mean, I was copping regularly,
Wherever you'd show up in like Wisconsin, you could get dope?
I was always pretty good at that, Like I could usually find...
A methadone punk rock kind of sanctuary for dope fiends.
Find some heroin somewhere. But finally I went back to California because finally I was running out of money, and I'm like, dude, I got to get back to California, hit a couple licks, make some money. And there was a chick that I knew... known her, basically all my life. She was a junkie, and that she was a sex worker, junkie.
You're looking for the right word for it. Yes,
a junkie sex worker, and she'd actually gone to Alaska and gotten clean, and she knew me. She knew I was on the run. She was solid OG, and she's like, Sammy, come up to Alaska. You can kick up here. I will take care of you, and then you can figure out your shit.
So you made it to Alaska.
I did. I went up there and I actually did find heroin, which blew everybody's mind up there.
Where did you find it?
I was like 4 days into the kick. I'm like, and she didn't have a car, but she knew a guy that had a car. And I'm like, get a guy with a car over here. I'll find some fucking heroin. She's like, nobody.
Did she want to get high too?
Of course, yes, okay. Of course. And he did too. He had come up. This guy, he was from Alaska, but he'd come up because he'd gone down to Seattle, got super strung out, came out to get his shit together. But that, he still wanted to. He wasn't like in recovery. He was just taking a breather. I think he probably had to run out of Seattle. Anyway, he shows up. We're driving around. I'm like, just take me to this shitty neighborhood. I'm like dope sick. We find this one guy. And he's trying to just work a hustle, which is fine. And I won't, he's trying to give him the money. I keep teasing him with the money, but he's taking me to these neighborhoods, and he gets out of the car, and comes back, but I won't give him the money, but it's like maybe the third spot that, we're sitting there and I see this other dude walking down the street. And this is in Alaska at night. And it's snowing.
And you were like, I know that's the guy.
I'm like, that dude's high.
Yeah.
Like, I see, I was like, and I jump out of the car and I just walk up. I'm like, hey, like, I need to cop. I'm sick. Can you help me? And he's like, yeah, come on.
Did you leave the other dealer in the car and we're done with him?
No, he had bounced. He had like went to go because he was just trying to get the money. He was just trying to work a hustle. So he came back. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. And I found but the thing was, it was like so expensive there. And I was already 4 days in. We didn't have a bunch of money. I mean, I barely even got well. They kind of got high, but the heroin in Alaska, there wasn't a lot, and it was really expensive, and it wasn't very good.
Did you say it was garbage?
Garbage.
Yes.
Garbage. So basically, I kicked. And so it wasn't soon after that. So I kicked. I got my shit together, but. I got busted. I mean, fairly shortly after that. I was up there. We were doing crime. We were kind of running amok. But what happened?
What kind of crime?
So here, this is a dopey story. Armed robbery in Alaska in the snow. Okay, have you ever tried to drive really fast in the snow?
I can barely drive really fast in good weather. But anyway.
So me and this dude, he's dead now. This guy Jerry, like we were doing crime up there, and so we were robbing liquor stores. I mean, I'm wanted for murder. I'm figure it's all over for me anyway. It didn't really fucking matter. And so we're going out to rob liquor stores. But the thing about, like, you know, when it snows like that, you know, it's the middle of winter, there's snow on the ground 24/7. You know, this is Alaska. So you can't just peel out, you know. And so I would go into the liquor store, you know, and I'd pull the gun and I'd be like, give me the money. And I'd usually get a bottle of booze too. I'd say, you know, give me that bottle of booze and everything in the cash register. That was my stick or whatever. And then I would have to walk, you know, like run across the store, but then you have to walk slowly out of the store because you'll slip and fall on your ass. And we had the tailgate down, and he would start driving away as he would see me leave. And then I would just jump on the back of the tailgate, and we'd drive away from the armed robbery at like 5 miles an hour.
Because you had to.
Because you had to. It's like so fucking retarded. You know, or like doing it fucking, you know, robbing liquor stores, driving away, you know, like at 5 miles an hour, you know. But at any rate, not long after that, it didn't last too long. I knew I had to get out of Alaska. There was a friend of mine who, she was kind of keeping tabs on who was ratting on me. And so she would let me know. And so she found out that somebody found out I was in Alaska. She's like, Sammy, you got to get out of Alaska. So I went to the airport, and it was snowed in. And I came back 24 hours later, and that was enough time for them to get their shit together. So when I went into the airport, federal marshals were waiting for me, and they snatched me up, and then they extradited me back to Oakland to face 25 to life.
When you're traveling and fleeing, you know, in as a fugitive, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you've just killed your girlfriend who betrayed you, and you have a heroin habit. Like, that's like, it's the worst thing I've ever heard. I mean, like, to be generous, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. And like, fucking, like, how much is guilt? How much is fear? Like, do you remember that period, or was it so fucking traumatically crazy that you can't possibly remember it?
I don't think I really started processing anything for years.
Right. How could you? Like, what was that period like? What do you remember?
I do remember, like, when I walked into that airport, you know, like, I've been a dope dealer since I was 12, you know, and so I have a good gut instinct. And I walked into that airport and I knew I was going to get busted.
Right.
I just knew. And I just, you know, and I gave up, you know, like, do we talk about surrender?
Yeah.
There was absolutely, when I walked in there, now if I'd walked in there and I'd saw like 20 cops, you know, but these were undercover, they were, you know, dressed like civilians. They didn't, you know, but if I'd have like walked in the door and I'd seen like 20 cops, I would have ran, you know, or I would have just turned around and left. But I walked in there knowing I was going to get busted.
And there had to have been some sort of weird relief, like that you can finally be done.
No, there was just, like you said, there was a surrender. It's like, okay, you know, like I can't keep running it anymore, you know, and there was an absolute surrender that happened. But as far as like processing what I did, that took it was years later, you know, because then I'm in the system, you know, first I'm brought down to, you know, like I'm extradited, I'm brought down to Oakland, I'm in county jail. And county jail in Oakland is fairly rough. And then, you know, I finally pled out. They offered me a manslaughter deal, you know, 11-year manslaughter deal. And, you know, I'm on the bus to San Quentin, you know, and being in county jail fighting, you know, but I mean, I was looking at 25 to life. Fighting that case, not a good time to process.
No.
Not a good place to process. Rolling into prison also is just like, it's, you know, if anything, you become far more hardened.
You have to be to survive it.
You know. And
did you get clean in there?
Well, I'd kicked in Alaska, so I was actually, when they busted me, I still I chipped a little bit and I drank every day. But when I was busted, I actually did not have a habit. So, you know, I went up to Alaska to get clean because the last thing I wanted to do was be in a position where if I got busted and I'm looking at 25 to life and I'm dope sick. I was terrified of that.
So the kick in Alaska actually took.
It worked. It did. Even though I did find heroin there, you know, we got high that one night. It didn't really even hardly do anything to me. And then I'm so far, like I was 4 days into a kick, 3 more days of just trying to hold booze down, and then I could start to function again. You know, and then I'm drinking pretty much every day. We got high a couple of the times with the heroin. There sucked so bad, and it was so expensive. Like the last fucking liquor store, I got $32 at the liquor store.
Right.
The last one I robbed.
What can you really get?
Right. And $32 for Alaska heroin wouldn't even get me high.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, you know, it was just, you know, ridiculous fucking petty hoodlum, you know, bullshit. But when I get to jail, I don't have a habit, you know, and when I got to prison, I didn't have a habit, but, you know, I learned how to make Pruno in county jail, like right off the bat.
So were you drinking just about every day when you were?
Well, it's not that easy. You know, it takes a while to make Pruno, you know, like
Chris was a big Pruno guy, and he would talk about making hooch here and there.
You know, you have to have a spot to do it. It smells, you know, and so, you know, we had it down till about once every 2 weeks. I had a pretty good batch you know, and then you'd get fucked up, you know.
So when you're in prison, your habits are not there. Your vices. What are your vices in prison? Like what's the difference? Like, because you had been a fucking total dope fiend, total drug addict, doing everything from age 14, basically.
Yeah.
And how old are you when you get busted?
24.
24 years old. 10 years
10
straight.
years of getting.
And then you're not. Yeah. And I've seen pictures of you in jail and in prison, and you like kind of seem like you had your shit together.
Well, you know, so what do you do in prison? I mean, it wasn't that I stopped shooting dope, but it was on occasion. You know, that there was a guy that I was in county with. He was this old white dude, been in and out of prison a bunch of times, been stabbed up, and he taught me the ropes.
He schooled you.
He did. He's like, do this, don't do this. This is what's going to be expected of you when you go in. You know, this is what you got to do. And he really broke it down for me. You know, we had a real tight bond. He was a super, super solid guy. And so I knew what to expect when I got to San Quentin. I knew what I had to do. And, you know, I definitely, you know, shot dope in prison. I was involved in running drugs in prison, but I never got strung out in prison. I never gambled in prison. Now I ran card games and cheated, you know, and hustled, but I didn't.
You never got caught doing that, though.
No, never got.
That would have been
yes,
bad.
That would have been bad, you know. But I never, you know, I was in San Quentin, then I was in Soledad, and Soledad at that time was a, you know, I was on the Central Yard, maximum security yard. It was a hard prison. Like, it was really fucking dangerous, you know. And so you really had to watch your back. You had, like, you getting yourself into a position, because I watched it happen over and over. Dudes would get strung out, couldn't pay, get killed or stabbed up, or even worse, PC up, and then get stabbed up on another yard down the road.
What's PC'd up?
Protective custody.
So what happens in that situation?
So, you know, then your name is garbage. You know, like if you
can't pay.
If you can't pay and you're afraid you're going to get killed, then some guys will choose to go into protective custody. The thing about
But then you're like the biggest pussy in the world.
Well, yeah, and the guards don't really give a shit about you, so they're just going to throw you out on some other yard somewhere else.
Where someone else is going to find you.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a dude, when I was in Solano, these guys, they're like, this guy, he had a tattoo on his stomach from their crew, you know, and they were one of my homeboys, you know, one of my really tight homeboys, like, hey, can you help us out? You know, it wasn't my crew, but I was tight with them. And I'm like, yeah, I can help you out. He didn't tell me we were going to hold this guy down and carve the tattoo off his stomach.
Oh my God.
I'm like, Smiley, next time you say, hey, can you do me a favor? You might want to give me a little more of a heads up about like what's about to fucking. Was
that
go
like
down.
a laugh after Smiley removes the tattoo and you're like, Smiley, next time tell me if you need it.
It's like really.
It's like that's like dark comedy to another level.
It is dark comedy in the penitentiary in California. Yeah, you know, it's like, come on, Smiley, give me a heads up.
What's the worst thing that happened in prison? Like that you can remember?
I mean, the worst thing that I did, you know, when I was in San Quentin, there was. You know, child molesters are their prey, you know, and I had a cellie, you know, I was young. I was, you know, just trying to earn my bones. My cellie was an older guy, and he's like, hey, there's a child molester down the tier. We got to handle this, you know. And so we were on the 4th tier in Carson section in San Quentin, and we ran up on the guy and threw him over the 4th tier, and he ended up in a wheelchair for life.
Oh my God.
You know, and I mean, you know, I'm not, it's not my place to make decisions about, you know, like, I don't know what he did. Most people that end up molesting people were molested as children. You know, I don't know what the solution there is. I really don't. But I know I'm not God, and it's not my place to make that kind of a fucking move.
Right.
You know?
Well, you were not in charge of what you were doing then in any capacity.
No, I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways.
People find recovery in prison, and that's just not what happened for you.
No.
You just found survival.
Yeah. I found all the homeboys, you know?
What did it take to find recovery ultimately?
So I'd been down a number of years, and I was very involved in politics and in drug dealing, but I got married. There's a woman that we'd started writing,
and she was like visiting you, right?
Yeah, she visiting me every week. You know, I knew her.
Was
on
she
the
a
street.
fan?
Well, no, but she was in the scene, and so I knew her.
She was like a punk rock girl.
She was a punk rock girl. I knew her from the scene. She was from Sacramento, and we'd started writing, and so we ended up we got married. You know, like so 5 years.
Did you get married in prison?
Yeah. You have. You know, I mean, yes, we got married in prison. You can get married in prison in California. It takes a long time. You got to jump through a bunch of hoops. So I've been down 5 years, super fucking institutionalized.
Right.
And like I said, I was very involved in a bunch of shit. And I went on that first conjugal visit. And I dropped down from a maximum to what was called a medium, from level 4 to level 3 points. I was in a slightly less, less protected, less militant prison. You know, level 3 is a little bit easier than level 4. But I'm in this visiting. It's a conjugal visit. They build these apartments, so you're like in an apartment that's built into a prison. And I'm in there, and I'm with my wife, and she's making dinner, and there's a window above the kitchen sink, you know, and out that window you could see over to where the yards were. And I'm sitting there on the couch, and it was just like this moment of clarity, you know, like I'd never had any kind of spirituality before. I was raised an atheist, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life on the yard. Like, that's like everything I've been doing. Like I had a date, you know, like I'd taken a deal for 11 years. Like I had a date I was supposed to parole, but everything I'd done in prison
wasn't going to make that happen.
Yeah, I was just waiting to get busted for something, you know, else. And I just had gotten lucky so far, and it was just so clear. Like I could maybe change everything, and I could maybe have some little apartment somewhere.
So you had the revelation in jail,
in prison, moment of clarity in prison, in a conjugal visit apartment with my wife, and it was just like, holy fucking shit.
Was she sober?
She wasn't sober, you know,
but she wasn't an addict.
She wasn't an addict, you know, at that time. And so it like, I didn't know anything about recovery. I didn't know, you know, but I knew I had to change everything, you know? And so that's when, like, I like fucking woke up the next day, and it was like, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, dude, what did I do?
Right.
Like, where am I? Like, dude, I killed somebody. Like,
that's when it started.
That's when it started fucking to hit me. And, you know, that's
once you saw the life that you might actually like, all of a sudden everything that you had done flooded into you.
Yeah. Like all the fucking pain that I'd caused, it was brutal, you know? But I created from that day, I created this moral code, you know, much like the spiritual principles. I'm like, okay, dude, I'm not like, I've got to fucking change everything, you know? Now, given where I was and who I was rolling with, that was very, the irony is that I wasn't really scared before. I mean, there were moments.
Because now you had rules.
Yeah.
Before that, you could help Smiley carve the tattoo off somebody, but now when you have a code, if Smiley needs a favor, you really need to know what you're going to do.
And now, if I, like, I might still have to hold some guy down while Smiley carves the fucking tattoo off a guy, but I'm going to fucking pay for it somehow.
Right. Spiritually, you know? If not actually.
Yeah. You know, so it was the next 6-8 months that was the hardest time I did. because I still had to be involved in what I was involved in. I couldn't just say, fellas,
I'm out.
I'm just, I'm not going to get high anymore. I'm not going to do this,
Smiley, find someone else to hold him down.
You just can't do that. You just don't get to walk away. But what happened for me, luckily, was I was still involved. I stopped getting high though. They break off my issue every time shit came in on the yard, because that was just the way it went. I would go sell it. And I wasn't using, and I just tried to keep my nose down as much as possible, and until then I actually dropped points, and I went from a level 3 to a level 2. The prison I went to was a Disney fucking land. It was Vacaville. Like, I dropped on a level 2 points in it. There were politics there, but it was. If
you wanted to take over that prison, you probably could.
It was such a whole different game.
Right.
So it was easy for me to change my whole program. Also, by that time I'd been down for a long time. People knew me from other prisons, so I had a certain amount of respect too. So I was able to do whatever kind of I wanted, run my own program, and I got involved in a lot of positive things there. Reading books on tape for blind people on the streets. I set up this whole program. We were doing books for kids, for blind kids, radio plays. We did Cinderella, a bunch of convicts sitting around a table making, doing it like a radio play.
And that's kind of teaching you what life could be like.
Right. It's being a service. It's not about me. It's okay, you get fulfillment from actually doing things for other people, And so because of that, finally I was able to parole. I kept my nose clean. I kept out of trouble. My wife got pregnant, and we were getting conjugal visits fairly regularly. Conjugal visits saved my life. I don't care what anybody says,
because it gave you something to live for.
It gave me something to live for.
Something good,
and it gave me a change of perspective too.
Right. It gave you your
my moment of clarity.
Exactly.
My epiphany.
It also gave you your kid, right?
And it gave Max, our firstborn. They were conceived. They were a conjugal visit baby.
Amazing.
And so finally I paroled. I've got my moral code, I've got my little nuclear family, and I get out of prison, and I just trying to live life, and things went well, for a long time. I alcoholics, drug addicts, we get clean, especially if we're hustlers, we can hustle good shit too,
It's about being occupied more than anything. It's about being busy. That's. I mean, for me, it's being busy is everything.
You've been busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been busy. And you're still here. So I got busy. I got a job, got a better job, a career, started my own business, bought property. My wife and I had another kid.
No music.
My daughter. Well, and I started playing music. Started doing music again. Start touring.
When did you get
sober.
the teardrop tattoo?
That was a long time ago.
When did you get that?
In the pen.
Did you ask for it, or did they just say you had to get it?
No. That was just part of the prison life. If you've killed somebody, then because in prison you can't go in there. Things are different now. Back then, tattoos meant something. You couldn't just roll in. If you had a teardrop and you hadn't killed somebody, you probably get stuck. It's you can't front like that.
But when you got the teardrop, you don't say, I want a teardrop?
Yeah, no, they're all right, yeah. No.
You're not forced to get the, it's not like the scarlet letter.
They don't hold you down. No,
right.
no.
Okay.
That was just, that was part of, because, I mean, the interesting thing is in prison culture, like I said, it's changed now, but, there is, people would get a teardrop for people they've killed, which does signify some sort of remorse. It's like
a penance.
Of penance, exactly. And
I can see that. I never really understood that before, but I can understand that now.
Yeah, and so that's why, now obviously that things have changed, but you couldn't, like I said, if you rolled into a prison and you had a teardrop tattoo and you hadn't killed anybody, then you
were in trouble.
You were in trouble.
So when people run into you when you get out and they see the teardrop, do they get scared? Do they react to it? Do they say, why do you have that?
Sometimes. It used to happen more often, obviously, than it does now, because you see, people have face tattoos
right.
and all kinds of different tattoos. And so tattoos don't...
They don't mean the same thing.
They don't mean the same thing that they did. But certainly, people might not... A lot of people probably didn't say anything, but every once in a while, somebody come up and say, hey,
What happened?
Like, yeah, is that real? Or I heard that means,
Right,
you know,
right.
and I usually sit down and go, yeah,
right.
you know, that's what happened, you know. So,
And you didn't stay sober though, right?
No, so-
how many relapses did you have between then and now?
well, I mean, one, it was just a long one. So I had 6 years and I had all this shit. Like, I built up all this shit. I had friends in recovery, like, that went to meetings and did all that shit. But it just, like, I'd had this moment of clarity, you know, and I got out and I had my family and I built up all these things on the outside. And I don't know, it just, I felt like I didn't need that.
So you weren't doing the work.
I didn't do, like, I did all this outside work, but when I was in prison, I'd read a lot of books, I'd done a lot of internal work, but when I got out, you know, I'd jump back into life, and I didn't do anything, you know, to honor that moment of clarity. I didn't really understand alcoholism or drug addiction either. It's like, you know, I didn't know that, like, this shit, like, I'm a lifer.
Right.
You know, that's just always there, you know. And so what happened was 6 years go by, you know, I built up all this shit on the outside. I'm playing music. We've been touring, but I was in San Diego at a club, and Jim Martin from Faith No More was playing guitar for Fang at the time, and he handed me a Coors Light, you know, and I'm just like, dude, what can one Coors Light hurt? You know, like, it had been like since I'd had, you know, Pruno, you know, had been a long time ago, but like a real, like a beer, it'd been, you know, I don't know, 12 years or something. It'd been a long time.
And it seems so innocuous, a Coors Light in your hand.
So fucking innocuous. Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's Coors, which is questionable if it's even beer. Coors Light, it's, you know, everybody says that shit's like water.
Right.
You know. And that one Coors Light took fucking everything.
Right.
You know, like, I drank that. I really didn't think that hard about it, and it fucking opened the door. And then I was, you know, it was kind of insidious too, because it wasn't like I drank a beer and then I'm at the dope man's house. You know, I drank a beer, you know, and then I got fucked up, and, you know, but it took a minute for me, you know.
How did it go? How did it get from the beer to heroin?
To where I was like shooting heroin.
Yeah.
So, you know, first I just started drinking.
I think that's important for people to hear that.
You know, that and it like I said, it was insidious because, like, I kind of, you know, like, I didn't drink every day at first. You know, we were on tour when I first had that drink, so I drank every day on tour. You know, that opened the gates. But when I got home, I've got the family, and you know, so
did you make the connection between drinking every day on tour and the fact that you were a drug addict?
No, because when I got home, I stopped drinking. You know, like, I didn't stop drinking, but, you know, like,
it wasn't like being a dope fiend.
Yeah, like, I didn't, you know, like, I worked my ass off, worked during the week, maybe have a couple drinks on the weekend. You know, like, me and the wife would go out, we'd go to the bar, and then, you know, and she stopped fucking around when I was in prison. So we both start drinking together. She hadn't drank in years either, you know, but now that I was, it opened that door.
And she didn't realize what could happen.
No fucking idea, you know, and like I said, it was insidious because I for a little while, I actually drank like a gentleman, but ultimately deep down, I am not a gentleman. I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict. And it took about a year before I was in a situation where there was, you know, sometimes I'd party too hard, do a little blow, whatever. But it took about a year before I found the rig in the bottom of the beer bottle. You know, and that's what always happens for me. I find the rig of heroin in the bottom of the beer bottle.
Right.
You know, and I was hanging out with this guy, and he pulls out some foil, and he's like, "Yeah, I go, you know, got to do my thing." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Let me get a taste of that."
Right.
You know,
and then it's done.
And then it was fucking done.
Right.
You know, and then it everything crumbled down. You know, like the business, the marriage. You know, like I'm the kind of. I've got a stolen car. I've got my kids, somebody else's kid, an ounce of heroin, and a fucking 357 under the seat that's got the numbers filed up. That's like normalized behavior for me.
As soon as it happens.
You know,
right.
You
as
know,
soon
like,
as the switch is on, it's like all bets are off.
Yeah, like that moral code out the window. You know, like I normalize real quick. You know, like whatever shitty behavior I need to do to make sure that I stay loaded, that's just normal all of a sudden. You know, where when I'm clean, when I'm sober, that kind of behavior is abhorrent to me. You know, like I would, you know, like to drive around with your kids with, you know, being a violent felon. I mean, but that's
the insanity.
That's the insanity.
How did you get to sobriety the second time? Like, what was the consequence? Was there consequences?
So, I mean,
because you didn't lose your kids, right?
Well, I'd abandoned my kids.
Right. So you did lose your kids by your own making.
I absolutely lost my kids. You know, I took off. The marriage had fallen apart. She also had started getting loaded, so it was super toxic. And I finally bailed on my kids. I ended up down in Texas. I had this guy, he was my crime partner. And, you know, sometimes you get around people and they bring you up, and sometimes you get around people and you're just horrible, you know, and we were just horrible for each other. And so we were down in Texas. We got stuck in Houston, and I'd done a tattoo on my homeboy sometime before. We had this 357, and so we ran out of money, and so we started doing armed robberies and doing collections down there. And this guy's got voices in huge letters tattooed across his forehead. Fairly recognizable, not the best crime partner to have, you know. And we were also such successful fucking criminals that we had one gun between the two of us.
Just find the guy with voices tattooed to his forehead. It's
yes.
like the worst,
you know. So we're living in this fucked up RV, you know. We're doing crime, just try to maintain shitty fucking habits. It's all, I mean, it's you know, it's all bad. And what happened was, voices went out to go. We'd take turns. You know, when
you called him Voices.
Well, no, but I'll leave his name out of this. But
I'm sure most people did or do.
Maybe. So when we
Mr. Voices,
it was his turn to go hit a lick.
Okay.
You know, when we do collections, we do it together. But when we went out to do a robbery, we'd take turns because we only had one gun. So it was his turn to go hit a lick to do a robbery, and he went out and he got busted. He'd been in prison in Texas before, so he gets cracked. And there was a woman down there, and her name was Faith. It was really her name, and Faith found out that Dave had gotten busted, and at Voices had gotten busted, and Faith came and she sat me down, and she's like, Sammy, there's only two ends to this story. She's like, either somebody's going to kill you or you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And for whatever reason, it was just like another moment of clarity.
And you heard her.
I heard her, you know, and it wasn't like other people had said, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're fucking your life up. You're fucking your kids like up. You know, I don't know what it was about that moment or about her, but I heard her, and I knew I had to stop what I was doing. And you know, it wasn't like it didn't happen immediately. I left Texas. I went to Philadelphia. I lived in Philadelphia for a while, trying to get my shit together. I wasn't doing any crime, but I was just trying to get on methadone. It was brutal. And finally, there was a woman in California, and she was in the rooms, and she'd always said, look, if you're ever really ready, I'll help you. You know, and so finally, I went back to California, and I started, you know, I had to kick. For me to kick her and this other friend of mine, she had a basement room, and me and my buddy, we actually boarded up the windows. We fucking got plywood, and we fucking boarded up the windows. I put a deadbolt in the door, and so you had to have a key to get out of this room. And I said, lock me in this room.
You wanted to kick in there.
Yeah, that I knew if I could get out, I would go get loaded. Like, the only way I could kick at that point, I knew, was I had to be locked up. And I just built the cell myself, you know. And so her and my buddy, they locked me in this room. And there was a bucket in there, and they would come, they'd clean the bucket,
mm-hmm.
and listen to me rant. And it was funny when she was putting me in there. She goes, "So how long is this gonna fucking take?" And I'm like, "It's gonna take a long time, and I'm gonna lie to you, and I'm gonna say that, yeah, I'm gonna say the house is burning down. I'm gonna say I'm dying. You just have to fucking ignore me." And so I was in that room for a month.
Wow.
You know, and that for me is what it took.
Do you remember it?
Vaguely. You know, I have some memory. There was a TV in there and a VCR, and every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on DVD or no, it was a VHS.
Sure.
So I watched every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer over and over again for weeks on end.
Right.
And I couldn't tell you I have no idea whatever happened in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And in all that kind of period, do you think you were haunted by Dixie? Like, did that come back? Like, every time that you tried to get centered, was that the first thing that would show up in your brain?
I think that there's a lot of...
Or your kids, it's so much.
I think that there's a lot of guilt,
Sure.
And I definitely think that that and like you said, my kids, the torment, because I don't want to have to feel the shame. I don't want to have to feel the guilt, and so, I think that's...
And the chaos.
It's why a lot of us do, and the fear, we're running from the fear, we're running from the shame, we're running from the guilt, and that's why booze and drugs are so fucking attractive, especially
because it takes us out of it.
Takes us away from it.
Gives us something that makes us think of something else, and we feel better. It physically makes us feel better.
Yeah.
And how soon after that, like you walked out a month kicking,
Yeah.
you kind of get your strength back in a month.
Dude, it was more than a month for me. I remember 6 months in, and I'm going, like, am I ever going to feel physically normal again?
Well, how serious was the last run?
8 years, shooting heroin every fucking day.
Right. How did you maintain that habit?
I did crime,
But robberies?
Well,
did you miss the acid business at that point because it was such good money?
The acid business, the acid kind of died at that time. So early on, I had built things up, and I'd become an electrician, and so I actually was able to keep it going for a long time because I was a pretty good electrician. I was an electrical contractor. I had my own company, so I had finances. So it took a while to really fuck that all off to the point where I'm living in an RV in Houston doing armed robberies. It took years.
With the guy with voices tattooed.
Yeah, with voices.
Yes.
Me and voices fucking running amok in Houston. So that was like the last year of that 8-year run. I got strung out. I've gone on methadone. I'm trying to keep the family together. It wasn't just like immediate crime and drama. I did have a family for, it was a slow, ugly descent, back into hell.
Total hell. Right. And then you seek out what you seek your own level, which is you knew that you were capable of going worse. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
it's like now, if you relapsed or if I relapsed, it probably wouldn't be enough until it got to that level.
No, that is the terrifying part that, I knew how bad it had to get last time. And I'm, one of my favorite slogans from the rooms is, if you can't be happy about what you have, be glad you didn't get what you deserved.
Right. I never heard that.
Because I know, I do not deserve the life that I have, that I got very, very lucky.
And to say dose here?
Disciple.
Oh, okay.
He's looking at my knuckles. I have disciple tattooed.
And what's disciple for?
Well, I had a band when I got clean, got sober. I put this band together. It was a recovery based band, called the Disciples, and we put out a record. And most of the, a lot of the songs were very much about redemption, recovery.
And you worked in recovery too.
Yeah, for years. So after I finally got clean, got sober, it took a while, but then finally I opened a sober house for men in Oakland and ran that for many years. We had, it was called the Promise House. Fucking awesome. Had a lot of guys coming from jail or coming from institutions, and so they knew
who you were.
They knew who I was. They knew I had been where they'd been. And so that made a huge difference.
Sammy, I think your story's obviously insane and tragic, but also it's amazing. Here we are, and you have 13 years, 12 years.
13 years.
You have 13 years of sobriety. You didn't really get naked at my father's house. We had, you know what I mean? You're doing good, and I'm happy you're here.
No, I really appreciate that you have me on.
Dude, I
really do.
There's a dude in New Zealand who sent in a voicemail about where he's at. You want to hear his voicemail?
Oh, absolutely. Let's check it out.
Is a big-time Dopey Nation guy named Mike. We'll call him Mike or Mick. Hold on, here we go.
Hello, Dave. Hello, Dopey Nation. It's Mike here. I hope everyone's happy and well. I just thought I'd send in a little message. I haven't sent anything in for a while. And this one's not really a funny story or any nostalgia value to it. It's just what's happened over the last 3 months for me. And I hope if anyone out there's fucking struggling, just please ask for help, because I could have avoided a lot of this if I'd have just been honest with myself and others and put my hands up and said, look, I need some help here, in whatever form that may be. I had a good few months, and I started having problems sleeping. I was very unfortunate as a kid. I was abused as a kid, and that has some knock-on effects now in how I react to things. And I was having a conversation with my partner about some stuff that had happened at our daughter's school. It was nothing bad at all. All I had to do was ask some sensible, intelligent questions, and she's a great mother, so she looks after our daughter's best interests. I had nothing to be worried about, but I didn't ask these questions and I didn't react normally, and it turned into a argument, and I ended up kicking the chair across the dining room in front of my 7-year-old daughter, who I'm in my head trying to protect. I then realised what had happened, and like by this point I was sort of close to having a fucking panic attack. I march into the bedroom, punch the wall several times until I break my hand. So off to the hospital, straight fucking cast, splint, all that, and of course pain meds. So there we go, bang. I stopped taking my Suboxone, start taking the morphine. They didn't prescribe me as much morphine as I'd hoped, so I started drinking vodka to fucking give it a kick up the arse. And this went on for a few weeks. I started taking Valium on top of that as well. Realised I'd sort of fucked up in the way this was heading and tried to cull it back, and sort of managed to. Stop taking morphine and the Valium and cut the drink down. Then I was just about ready to go back to work. And bang, I got appendicitis, probably as a result of the sheer amount of shit I've been putting into my body over those few weeks. In the hospital, appendix out, wake up, fucking fentanyl patch on me, and a fucking script for morphine and tramadol. Come back home, first thing I do, go down the shop, still stitches and everything. I'm not really even meant to be out and about. And we were in a form of we had a brief lockdown here in New Zealand as well, because there was a spike in COVID cases. So I go straight down the chemist in lockdown to cash my script. While I'm down there, I buy vodka and I buy more Valium off a guy who I know down there, Skeezer, who's down the chemist all the time. Walking back to the car, stopped by the police because it's locked down. They searched me. They found the Valium, but it was the only thing on me that was unmarked. I had a big bag of legitimate pills, so I got away with that one. They just sent me home. Where I just fucking had a meltdown and went, look, this is ridiculous. I need to just fucking get it together, I'm sleeping only a couple hours a night and just freaking out at the slightest little thing, and putting on this fucking facade of normality, It's this sort of weird pretense, defense or whatever, but it's because I let it get so far, If I have just fucking put my hands up and said, look, I'm struggling, I need some fucking help. It doesn't matter what that help looks like, just please ask for it. I'm not the most active on the social media peer support groups these days because, I don't know, for whatever reason, but I see people posting things, asking for help, and there's a myriad of other ways to do that. So if you're struggling, please do. I'm in a point now where I'm sort of thinking about going away for fucking 28 days to sort my shit out again. It the thought has crossed my mind, and I'm thinking quite seriously about it. But I could have probably nipped that in the bud if I'd have just been fucking a bit more honest with myself and others. So, yeah, there we go. That's my fucking spiel. Look, I hope everyone's well and happy, and I hope someone gets something from this. I don't know. But anyway, thanks, Dave, for all you do. Loads of love to everybody. Fucking stay strong, Dopey Nation, and toodles for Chris.
So that's a crazy deal for this guy.
Super intense.
Right? I mean, like, you listen to it, and I mean, you've worked with addicts, but I can still see it hitting you because you can relate to it.
I can. It's like, dude, you're so trapped. So trapped. I really hope that, I absolutely, like, get into a program, like, get yourself away from the circumstances as soon as you can,
especially when there's opiates involved, because it's just hard. Like, I'm amazed that you locked yourself in a basement and got to walk away from opiates, even for a month. I mean, like, I never could do it unless I had to go away every time. Like, I never could do it unless I went away.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about it was, like, that it was, she lived kind of far out in the middle of nowhere too. So even after I came out of the basement, we were still, and honestly, like, I had another whole year of chipping and struggling.
That's where Mick is at.
And right, and of not being able to stay sober, stay clean, and I don't like that moment when I finally really totally surrendered and just stopped trying. Like, I can't tell you why that happened when it did. It's just like I just feel super grateful that it did.
But not only that, you worked a 12-step program.
Oh, absolutely.
And I never wanted to work a 12-step program.
Fuck no.
I just found that it actually, and it's so funny because when I was young and I would go to meetings and people would say it works if you work it, I would be like, fuck you. I don't want to hear about it. It's annoying that you say that.
Yes.
But only now do I actually understand what it means, that if you actually do work, you have a better life.
Yes.
And it's easier. And like, it's easier. It would be easier for Mike. You know what I mean? It's like people are scared of the dogma around 12-step. People are scared of all that shit. But it's like, it's easier. It's a bedrock foundation.
Yeah, and I mean, there are other ways to recover. I absolutely know that, but I also know for me, like, I tried everything else. Methadone, Suboxone, all that bullshit. Nothing except for abstinence and going to meetings, doing everything. Like, just doing what other people told me to do. I never fucking did what other people told me to do. You tell me to do something, I'd say, go fuck yourself.
Exactly. Take some suggestions. And, like, whatever it is, doesn't have to be a 12-step thing, Mike, but I mean, like, I couldn't build a bookcase if it wasn't from IKEA. Like, I need fucking, I can't make fucking brownies without a fucking recipe.
A recipe. That's what I always talk about, is like a recipe. And that recipe's, like, some people need to work out 5 times a day and go to 2 meetings a week and meet their sponsor once a month. You just got to figure out what that recipe is. But I will say that for a good portion of the people that I know, the 12 steps has been a good portion of their recipe that's definitely made a big difference for them.
I know it's my recipe. I also know that, like, it was accessible and free and pretty easy to follow, and I needed it. Needed it to work.
Yeah.
Mike, you do whatever you got to do, and everybody should do whatever they can do to feel better, whatever they can do to hold on and get through the day.
Yeah.
Do it.
Days are weird right now.
Oh, yeah.
We got some weird fucking days. Anybody who gets sober during the pandemic, my hat is way off to you.
Right. Or stays that way.
Yeah, or stays that way. Absolutely.
It's fucking crazy fucking times. Anyway, Sammy, thank you for coming through.
Thanks for having me. I'm fucking super glad. I love the show. I'm really glad that you brought me on.
Well, me too. And we say, stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris.
All right, toodles for Chris.
Right on, man.